And yes, we are live on YouTube. So hello everyone who's joined. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Aryan, and welcome to our third webinar, which is on studying economics or business management in university. And we hope you would find this extremely useful. So for people who don't know, Project Access is an organization that helps students like you apply to university from different backgrounds and from just from wherever you are. We want to get you into university, and we offer free mentorship for that. So this is something new that we're trying. This is called the Access Academy, where we're just helping you make those decisions before you sign up for our program. We will talk more about the program as the presentation goes on. To explain the rough format, we have three panelists with us today who's studying economics or business management at different universities or have studied it prior. I will introduce them and we'll have a short presentation, about 30 minutes. As you can see, there is a Q&A feature which you can use, where you can just start pouring in questions. We will probably answer all of those questions at the end. So we'll have a 30-minute presentation followed by 45 minutes of Q&A. So just keep your questions pouring in. If you feel like you want to speak your question, you can raise your hand by the end using the Zoom hand raise feature, and I will just unmute you and you can ask your question. So the goal of this webinar is definitely to inform you guys better of what economics and what business management is, and that's exactly what we are going for. So is economics or business management for you? Where all can you study these courses? And obviously the most important topic, which is your questions. So now we have, let me introduce our panelists for today and they can take over then. So first we have Christian, who's from Germany. And he has had a really interesting background, I guess. He studied economics in UCL and is now studying medicine at Berlin. Hi, Christian.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so yeah, I'm originally from Germany and I did a bachelor in economics at UCL, which I absolutely loved. And my focus was mainly on quantitative methods and then also on macroeconomic policy. So when I did economics, I really enjoyed it, but I always had two passions in life. So I later on, after my bachelor, decided to continue with medicine in postgrad to really combine my two passions. But this focus today will obviously be on economics here, and I will show you what it really is like to study economics, what different topics you can do, and really how great of a subject it is.
Next, we have Zosia Shiviontek, who is from Poland, and she studies PPE at Warwick with me. Hi, Zosia.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm in my first year, and I'm studying PPE, which is philosophy, politics, and economics. As you can tell, it's a joint honors degree. And I chose the economics major pathway, which means that I'll major in economics in my second and third year. During this webinar, I'll present to you the option to do a joint honors degree with economics or with management. And I'll tell you more about what it's like and why someone would make that choice.
Thanks a lot, Zosia. And finally, we have Caroline, who's from Denmark and who is studying business management at King's College. Hi.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm studying business management at King's in my first year. And the reason for studying business management is basically that I'm very interested in the strategy behind a business. Managerial economics is also very important to actually figure out what a strategy is. And then I was always quite fascinated with why numbers change as they do. And that can seem kind of confusing if you don't know what happens in a business. So that little phrase actually sums up everything that a business management course will actually tell you.
Yeah, thank you. And now I'll give it over to you guys.
Yes, great. So we're going to kickstart today's discussion with economics. Our goal is to explain what economics actually is, what it is like studying it at a university level, and then also later on we'll give you a snapshot of what it's like to be in a final year economics student, and we'll also look at what different types of course structures there are in economics. So yeah, we'll dive into that. So on this slide here, you can you want to ask yourself, okay, so what is economics? You will see quite a formal definition there. I like to put it a bit more simpler sometimes. So for me, economics is the study of individual decision making from all different sorts of angles. So basically, as an economist, you study the interaction of people, and then you try to draw conclusions from what you've studied. So a big part of this is collecting data and creating different models. So essentially, an economist's best friend is data. And then you want to basically modify that, like analyze that data and see what conclusions you can draw from this. So roughly, even though this is by no means an exhaustive list, economics can be divided into both the the field of microeconomics and macroeconomics. So microeconomics here studies the individual people's behavior and then their decision making, whereas macroeconomics studies what these individual decisions, what the impact of these individual decisions have on the greater collective. So there are two main distinctions in economic degrees you can that you need to consider before you choose the right subject for you. So there's a Bachelor of Arts, a BA, and then there's a Bachelor of Science. So for economics, the Bachelor of Science is much more math heavy. So you will have a higher focus on quantitative data analysis. You will have more math modules. You will use more statistics. And you will use that data to do predictions, for instance, or to analyze and create models. On the other hand, there's also a BA. A BA is a Bachelor of Arts, where the focus is less on math, but more on the qualitative analysis of data. So this means that if you decide to do a BA, you will do more analysis and in terms of essay writing as well. So here on this slide, you will see some of like three questions that an economist likes to ask him or herself, and then find the answers to. So I assume because you're having a look at this this webinar, you are interested in some of the areas we're discussing. So maybe you want to look at these questions and just see whether whether they intrigue you. So what I found really interesting about economics is, for example, the macroeconomic domain. So obviously in everyday life, you kind of feel how macroeconomic policy, or basically how macroeconomic policy affects people's decision-making every day. So that is, for instance, why So that is, you can look. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry. Okay, so you want to ask you what's different. Okay, sorry. Okay, so for instance, you want to understand what it's like, how the global macroeconomic industry works. So for instance, in macroeconomics, there is the impact that in some national and governmental decision makers can have on individual people's lives. So that is, for instance, the impact of monetary policy. And then you will also look at the supply and demand side of things, which is probably something that you've already discussed at school. That is how businesses can analyze the what quantities they should produce goods. And finally, there is also an aspect that many people do not, first of all, associate with economics, and that is the psychological aspect of it, being that, for instance, in the domain of game theory, you also analyze the individual decision-making when it comes to, for example, specific games. There are a very traditional example is, for instance, an auction. So that's also a part you will be discussing when you study economics. Finally, I think also that a lot of people find interesting is that of using statistics to predict certain outcomes in the future. So that is especially in macroeconomics, people use data to predict, for example, the value of the stock market. So yeah, first of all, on this slide, you have a couple of Mythbusters, because I think there are some stereotypes about economics out there. Some of them might be true, some of them are wrong. So as the first one, you have everyone goes into consulting or investment banking. And these are your only options. And that is not true. So there is a very high interest in those fields. But that does not mean that that it's really limited to just these two areas. For instance, you can also go into public policy, into the public service. For example, you can work as an economist at a ministry. Again, as I mentioned before, for example, what happens in a central bank and how macroeconomic policy is done. But then also you can explore the domain of just doing research in economics, which is also very interesting. As a second mythbuster, it says you can only study economics if you're a math wizard, and that's absolutely not true. As also, you don't need to be a math wizard when you apply for economics at university. Some people have had quite advanced math in high school. Some people have not, but basically all the skills you need, you will be learning at university. So yeah, you will be definitely fine if you don't yet know everything in math that you think you might need as an economist, because you will be taught those skills. And then also it's important to distinguish between BA and BSc, because like I mentioned before, if you're more interested in the math side of things, you might want to put your focus on a BSc. And then if you're less interested in the math part, but also in the qualitative analysis, then you might want to consider BA as you might want to think that BA is the right thing for you. As the final mythbuster, economics is about learning how to make money. That is not true. Something I really want to point out here is that that economics really teaches you how to think. So by the different data you analyze, by the different models you look at, you learn how to think, but you don't learn how to make money. I think that's a very simplistic, basic stereotype. And one thing also to point out, studying economics is not studying business or studying management. We will later discuss together with Sasha and Caroline what it is like to study management and business. And hopefully that you will see the distinction between those three subjects. And then you can hopefully decide which one is the best for you. So on this slide, you can see what it is like to study economics at UCL. This is not to make any advertising here. It's just to show you what a course structure of an economics degree can look like. So basically, as it's like with many university courses, in the first year, you mainly study the basics and the foundations really you need to be able to do more advanced analysis further down your university career. So for example, for me in first year, I had an economics course, which is basically for me, the information you would learn at an A-level level or IB, for instance, and then builds a little bit on top of that. And first year also really gives you the introduction into the different aspects of economics. That is the models, which you find, for example, in my model economics, but then also the math and the statistics side of things. For me, also, I had the ability to choose a language. So if you study economics, many universities in the UK, also in the US, provide electives. That means you can choose subjects that are completely outside of what you normally would be studying. Which I think, at least for me, was very, very interesting. Then towards in second and third, you're usually able to specialize more, and then you can select different domains of economics that you're interested in. That is, for example, I chose macroeconomic and quantitative theories, but you can also do, for instance, development economics, labor economics. So the list is basically endless. You can also go onto the website from universities. You will see all the different types of subjects there are. It's really interesting. There's so many different things you can learn. And yes, just as a final note, we don't want to talk too much just about this right now. For instance, in final year, the office hours or the amount of face time and presence teaching you have is not actually that much. So for instance, I had 3 lectures of 2 hours a week, and then 3 tutorials, 1 hour, and then 2 hours of language classes. Times 2. But that does not mean that the rest of the time you have free time, there's a lot of studying you want to, a lot of further analysis you want to be doing in between that, and also in the extracurriculars are quite a big thing in economics. So you have the ability to also go beyond your horizon at university and study a lot of different other interesting things that we can also touch on later if you guys are interested.
And then we will move on to business management courses and what it means to study business management. The phrase that I mentioned in my own introduction, I wanted to learn what lies behind the numbers and what actually makes the numbers move up or down, or why they do as they do. That is everything business management will teach you, because what moves the numbers is everything that happens in a business, investments that are made. Have we done anything in HR? Have we introduced a new product? Have we introduced a new strategy towards how we spend our money? All of that goes into what it's like to study business management. I'll just dwell upon that a little bit more in the next explanations. So what is business management? As a very formal explanation, good management is a backbone of successful organizations. And that is in itself very, very broad. If we try and narrow it down a little bit, successful business and having successful management in a business comes down to planning and organizing, directing and controlling. And so those four components go through every aspect of how it is like to run a business. Running a business contains many different aspects, and that's what you'll also experience in a business management degree. It's very broad, and you will be able to, at least in King's, pick and choose your courses, and also then in that way specify your degree from the beginning. A business management degree will also entail certain parts of economics. It won't go in that much depth as a pure economics degree, but you need to know enough in order to understand the numbers, and you need to be able to make decisions upon the numbers, which is basically what is also entails in planning and organizing. You need to understand what's happening in the business. So you will touch upon it, definitely will. Some Mythbusters about business management. Management is not a serious degree, which is what I heard from some of my UK friends when I started at KCL. It definitely is. Management teaches you like both qualitative and quantitative skills, and it basically gives you skills to go in and work in any sort of business. It doesn't narrow you down to you have to work as a doctor, or you have to work within like a car business, for example. Management is so broad that you can go and work with anything. So I would definitely consider it as a serious degree. Without anyone who studied management in the world, there would be no companies, at least no successful ones. Next Mythbuster is management of business studies are only for the elite or the snobby. That is definitely something I experienced, especially in Freshers Week, actually in London. Everyone gets really, like, they suspect that you're very posh and very snobby when you choose to study business management, but not more so than any other course, I would say. Of course, at some of these London universities, everyone has to pass like a certain benchmark to get in, and therefore it's like a common standard. Everyone expects you to be just as good as themselves, and that actually is quite a comforting environment. It's not as competitive as I would have thought it would have been. So that was very, very nice to experience that no one is just like doing their own race and not being able to actually be social. So I wouldn't say that's not the case. And management or business studies only think of one thing, and that's money, which is something I, again, repetitively hear. But I wouldn't say that it's something that we think of any more than any other degree. Hopefully, when you take your degree, you want to get out and get a job. You will get paid as much for that job, maybe as someone who did business management. But business management is just so much more than the final product you will get from working. You actually need to enjoy what you're working with. And if you enjoy business and management, it doesn't matter how it pays you in the end. So let's move on and see a little bit more about the courses at KCL and how the structure would be as well. So business management at King's is very much up for your own choosing. The only year that is preset entirely is the first year. And in first year, you have a lot of courses. And why we have so many courses, I will get back to explaining in a minute. So they actually changed the course structure for the first year when I started in September. So they made it much more broad. They wanted to introduce us to a lot of different subjects. So we have social science, modern business. We had work in contemporary society. We had business ethics and sustainability that touches upon how can companies make ethical decisions and what happens sometimes if they stand in an ethical dilemma. How do you solve that? So the first year is really to inform you and introduce you to as broad a range of what business management entails for you to be able to make good decisions of what modules you want to choose for year 2 and year 3. So in year 2, this is actually, I think, my courses that I'm doing next year. From the line, the first 4 courses are preset. You have to do those. The last 4 of them, corporate finance, intermediate macro, intermediate micro, and economics of strategy, is what I've chosen. So in second year, again, we get 50% electives. Just as UCL, you will have a broad range of electives, and you can choose to go in any other direction that you choose. I've chosen to focus more on the economic side because that's what I figured out in my first year. That's what I liked. And that is what I was good at studying as well. And in our third year, we actually have 100% electives. There is no preset modules for third year. You can completely tailor it as you wish, which is also the reason for why I chose business management at King's College. That we can actually go, and if my interests change in the course of the next year, I can still counteract for that in my third year and study something that I still find interesting. So the years at KCL look like this, but why there are so many modules in the first year, I will explain now. Actually, I'll just skip to that here. So in the first year, all modules are 10 credits, which is a little bit different because normally they would be 15 credits and you have to have like an overall year of 120 credits. So that meant instead of, so in the first year when we only have 10 credits per module, we need to have 12 modules. And that also reflects in how my schedule looked. The first semester was not as challenging as it could have been. We maybe had like 10, 12 hours of school, which is quite normal. And that's combined lectures and tutorials. But in our second semester, we had, some weeks we had 20 hours of contact, which would either be lectures or tutorials. So because they pack 4 more courses into a year, that will give you a bit more work to do in your second semester and you will have more work to prepare for. But in the end, I think it's all worth it because you actually get a much better understanding of what you want to do in your second and in your third year. So first year, a bit challenging, but it will prep you in the end to face second and third year way better. So second and third year are all like normal in regards to credits, 15 credits a module. In your second year, it's 50-50 for elective modules and compulsory modules. And in the third year, all modules are 100% electives, which again gives you so much freedom. As with UCL, you have plenty of elective modules to choose from, but I would also suggest that you plan ahead for what modules or courses you would like to take in your second and in your third year, because some of them are prerequisites for the others. So for example, choosing my courses for second year, I had to look ahead for the third year and see what I actually wanted to take in my third year, because there were some prerequisites there that I then had to cover in my second year. So in that way, you do get limited a little bit, but it's like you're limited to your own decisions. So in that way, you have a lot of freedom from studying business management. I think Sasha will take us over here.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Caroline and Chris, for describing your courses. And now I will talk about joint honors degrees, and I will touch upon joint honors degrees that combine economics and also business management. So I chose to study a joint honors degree myself. As I mentioned before, I did PPE. So part of my degree was economics, and that's a part of my degree that I chose to make more like basically more important in my second and third year. So I think that joint honors degrees are a very good choice for some people, less of a good choice for others. So I'll maybe take you through the reasoning and hint at different things that you should consider while choosing a degree. So the benefits of doing joint honors degrees are that you do not have to specialize from the very beginning, and the course structure is flexible. So for some people, it might be very hard to choose one area of focus immediately after high school. You might simply be unsure regarding what to choose. And if you have, for example, 3 passions and you find a degree that combines these, then that could be a good way out to basically ensure that you can keep developing these skills and dive into these areas of interest. A second reason for doing a joint honors degree is that you see, for example, the value in studying economics, whether you are unsure if that's something you will be happy fully focusing on. That was partly the case for me. So I never had economics in high school, and I would feel quite uncomfortable making the choice to study it immediately after graduating, simply due to my personal preferences. So by doing it as part of my degree in my first year, I saw that that's something I really enjoy. So because of the flexible structure of my degree, I can make it a major in my second and third year, and I'll be able to graduate with PPE with an economics major. But however, there are some possible downsides that people should consider. An obvious one is that you will not be able to study as much. It's not like you're doing 3 degrees at the same time. You're still doing 1 degree. So that means that you'll simply have less of that course, course. And if you really want to dive into it and do it in depth since your first year, starting from your first year, then I would consider maybe just giving up on the other components. Another thing which I think many people forget about is that it can get quite difficult to master such a versatile approach. So for example, in my course, because I had philosophy and politics alongside, I had to master essay writing as well. And there are no different standards for people who are doing joint honors degrees. We are also judged, our work is also assessed in the same way that, for example, people doing straight politics would have their work assessed. So it means that if I'm writing a politics essay and I'm doing a joint honors degree, I'm supposed to write an essay that's as good as someone who's doing straight politics. So that's something to consider, although I wouldn't be too scared of it, because it's definitely doable for most people. Okay, so when it comes to considering joint honors degrees for economics and business management, a thing that sometimes is quite confusing to people is that sometimes these degrees are called BA, and so Bachelor of Arts, and sometimes a Bachelor of Science. So what determines this distinction is, as Christian mentioned before, how mathematics or science-based the course is. So for example, if the other component of, for example, economics is also a science or is also something that's more mathematical, then the degree is likely to be a BS. However, if it's something like a language or politics, then the course might be BA. However, that really depends on individual universities as well. And sometimes the title of the course can change depending on the modules that you take. So for example, that's the case for PPE. People at Warwick who choose PPE initially do it as a BA. However, if they choose the economics major in their second and third year, then the degree changes to a BS, so a BSc, so it can change. Okay, so just to give you an overview and maybe inspire you to look into the variety of joint honors degrees. Here we have a very brief list with examples of universities that offer these courses. However, be aware that this list is by no means exhaustive, and that you should definitely look into a variety of universities and different course opportunities as well. So a possible course would be, of course, BPE. There is also the option to study, for example, history and political economy. So that's economics with, a certain approach, predetermined. There are also opportunities to study economics and history, economics and international relations, and even something as relatively specific as economics and business with East European studies, and that can be taken with a year abroad. So you can see that the options are endless, and you can really tailor it to your interests. Also, other things that can be done is, for example, economics and industrial organization, economics and accounting. So if you're thinking of a career as an accountant, then maybe that could be a good choice to already specialize if that's what you prefer. And then certain universities have very specific courses, like for example, Morse, that is offered only at Warwick, and that combines mathematics, statistics, and economics. So it's a very Warwick specific course.
Sorry, I just like to weigh in on one thing here, which is that Oxford is an exception here, especially in regards to the BA/BSc debate. I think we slightly mislabeled that PPE, for example. Oxford only offers a Bachelor of Arts, and it's the same for economics and management as well. And I don't think it's less mathsy in any way. So I wouldn't necessarily give it that much weight either to whether what you're going for is BA/BSc. And I would really just look into the course structure overall and what kind of weightage it gives you. And at the end of the day, employers don't care that much whether you did a BA/BSc, because obviously people from Oxford are exclusively doing BA when they're studying economics, and it's perfectly fine for them. So just to add a little bit onto that. So
yeah, thank you, Aryan. So I think
the comment as well, Sasha. Course might be called business management or economics. It can entail very, very different things. It might be a BA economics called the same, two different universities, and it's not at all the same. So I would definitely be aware of that when choosing, no matter what degree you choose. Look into modules and course structure really, really thoroughly, because that can make or break if you want to study that course.
Yeah, I think that is very good advice. So of course, the things that we are presenting here, these are just examples. So of course, other universities also offer these courses, and every course is different. Every university in itself is different as well. So it's important to, of course, consider individual cases as well. But this is just an overview, and of course, we are simplifying things here, just so that people are not too confused. Yeah, but so to mention possible joint honors degrees for management, at Warwick, for example, you can do international business with languages. So there is, for example, international business with French, and then you are also learning, a foreign language, hopefully, so that you can use it at work later. There is also something called international management, and then there's also just management. So of course, the twist here is the difference here in the name isn't that big. It's still management. It just kind of can nuance the approach. It can also, as Caroline said before, can also change what the course actually entails. At King's, there is business management, and then there's also a course called economics and management, which nicely combines this entire webinar. And there's also management science at UCL, and even something called a Bachelor of Science in Information Management for Business, which is also a version of management, however, with a focus on something else. So yeah, to summarize, basically, these courses might have different names, but sometimes the core modules and skills developed remain the same. Sometimes, on the other hand, the names are very similar, but the degrees are different. So it's also it's always super important to look into the structure, and universities make this information widely available to everyone. You can literally go to your course and look at the possible modules you can take. Okay, so now to quickly give an overview of different careers and opportunities, because you might be asking yourselves the question, okay, so I studied this, and then what do I do in life? So we have a few key messages, key takeaways for you guys on this. So the first key takeaway would be that you can really study, like you can really do almost anything after studying these courses, unless your career path is aimed at something extremely specific, like for example, being a pilot. But really, the skills that you're learning are very transferable, and also you're developing skills by engaging in activities outside of your course. So Caroline said that, you know, in her course, maybe the number of contact hours was only 10 in the first semester. So that leaves you some time to engage in societies at the university and to maybe apply for different internships so that you can develop new skills. Overall, the different careers that could interest possible students of economics or business management is consulting, banking, public policy, ministries, marketing, and business journalism. But there are so many more, and it's really about, you know, learning how to think and learning these skills to apply in the workplace. And we have here a list of different firms that could possibly interest you. Okay, so another thing that some people can think about after finishing their degree is further studies, and that is also a good option for some people. So to talk about management and economics here, there is something called Masters in Business Administration and MBA. So it is very prestigious at some universities, and it can be good for career progression. Sometimes when people choose to apply to do a master's, they don't do one immediately after finishing their bachelor's, which is actually something I didn't know before starting university. So it is also a thing to keep in mind when you're planning, you know, your life journey, and considering different options. So some people just prefer to gain work experience before applying to do a master's. So there's no need to do it immediately after finishing the bachelor's. And by doing an MBA, you can earn the skills to deal with real life situations and managing other employees. And there's so much more to learn. Of course, part of this you can also learn by doing a bachelor in management, for sure. However, an MBA can also be an option to, you know, master these skills. And there are some very good universities that offer an MBA also in continental Europe, for example, in France. So it is not necessarily the case that you have to finish your bachelor and your master's in the same country, for example, the UK. It is also perfectly possible to go to another country if that's an option that you prefer to have open. Okay, so to very quickly talk about economics. Usually people who actually study economics don't become economists per se, so they don't work with, you know, using the knowledge of all the models that they learned. They rely more on the transferable skills. However, if you want to a job directly related to economics, further study can be recommended. And there's an array of master's and PhD opportunities that allow you to specialize further and conduct research in your area of interest. Because as Chris said before, research in economics is important, data is important, and a good economist should be able to use data to draw conclusions. So for example, at Oxford, you can do a master's in financial economics. So that's, you know, already more of a focus on finance. It's also possible to do economics for development, so more, you know, on maybe developing countries. Yeah, so now we can move into Q&A.
Thank you so much, Zosha, for this. I think it was extremely helpful. It also, in a way, explained to me how confusing all of this can be. So personally, I am studying a joint honors degree as well. So I study philosophy, politics, and economics, PPE, at Warwick with Zosha. And definitely one of the reasons I chose this was I was interested in all of these subjects, but I think just the overview, I didn't even realize there were so many options out there before I applied to university. So I definitely think this was extremely helpful. Before we move on to the question and answers, I'd just like to reiterate, the fact that this is so confusing, this can be made easier for you if you sign up as a mentee with Project Access. I will talk a little bit more about this at the end, but this is definitely something to keep in mind, and it just helps you it just helps you to have someone who is holding your hand throughout this journey as you go through applying to university. So I think the first question we have, which is an interesting one, is what are some of the best minors that one can study with economics for someone who studies commerce at school? So commerce is usually like business studies, etc.
I think I can start that off. If you study commerce at school, you will actually, I think you will meet it in every minor degree that you will take, either that be business or business management or even a joint degree. All like a basis for first year will all include some sort of commerce or marketing even though we're not studying a marketing degree, you'll just need to know, especially for management degrees. So best minors, it's difficult to say because did you enjoy commerce? If you did, I would try and find something that's similar to that. And again, it's really, really difficult to go out and say, here I have a course that mentions commerce in their folder. I will go for that one. Because if you look into it, there might be 5 other courses that is not called anything about like business or has management mentioned in their folder, but they will still entail some of the same courses and some of the same modules that will cover the same things. So I can't go out and recommend a specific minor to you. I would really dive in depth of the different courses you find. Maybe also focus on what schools you like. Would you like to live outside London, in London, rural parts of England? Figure that out as well, because all of that will have a big impact on your studies and your 3 years you're going to spend in another country. So can't give you one specific minor to go for, but I can tell you to please go and do your research, because it's going to benefit you in the end.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think just doing whatever you find interesting is good advice as well, because you would only study what you find interesting. So for me, that was philosophy. I am enjoying philosophy a lot. So I'm going to major in economics as well, but I am enjoying philosophy. So for sure. So that's why I chose philosophy. It's not really a technically good fit with economics, but I think it's valued by employers nonetheless. And I think it just teaches me skills that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. The next question we have is, what are the differences between the degrees of economics and statistics?
Between, what did you say before economics? What are the differences between?
The degrees of economics and statistics.
Okay, so in statistics, the main focus is just on learning the methods for analyzing data. And for economics, you also have a lot of the theory around it concerning the economy. So you will be using a lot of statistics within economics, but in itself, statistics is a much more focused course on the math side of things rather than on the economic side of things. In most statistics degrees, though, you are also able to choose electives, but you will probably not have as the foundation of your course specific economic modules. So just like to put it just bluntly, it's very more mathsy in statistics, and in economics, you have more of the applied way of using statistics and math.
Yeah, I would say that statistics and economics is like seen as a tool to analyze, economic trends. So even in our PPE degree, everyone had to take a module in statistical techniques to learn statistics and the math behind it. However, it was not necessarily the goal in itself. It was more to prepare us to use statistics to understand economics as well.
Yeah. So thank you for that. The next question we have is, can you take a language with a major or a minor? I know, Zosha, you did take a language, so maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, so I had French during high school, and I wanted to continue learning the language. So I decided to use my elective, my optional module, to take French. That is not something that's intrinsically part of my degree. For example, Aryan didn't take a modern language. However, I wanted to keep learning French, and that was perfectly possible. So most courses do offer a restricted number of optional modules that you can choose. And at most universities, you can choose a language. It is very much encouraged.
I think it's the same for King's as well. We actually have a degree at the King's Business School, which is international management. With international management, you do take, I think you have 2 languages that you like involved in your course, and you can choose them yourself. And then it's a 4-year course. So in your 3rd year, you go abroad, do a placement year simply, which also is very, very beneficial for the international students, the ones that do international management. Otherwise, for the rest of us who have like a normal degree, so to say, that doesn't involve a language, we can still choose it. King's has a language center that can teach you basically any language. There are very, 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 like a lot of options. And I'm also doing French next year, just because I always loved French and wanted to learn it. So I'm taking that next year, and that's free of charge, at least for the business school. You can take an additional language module. But I would definitely recommend doing some additional stuff. It's not on as one of your electives. It's something that you choose additionally to do, but it's always a good thing to have for future employees. You know a bit of French, and I know German from before I studied at King's as well. So having additional languages is definitely a plus. If you want to do it as a degree, International Business at KCL will give that to you. Otherwise, you can choose it if you want to and as you wish. And you can study, like, I know you can have Mandarin, Arabic, you can have Russian. There's like so many different languages that are really, really in handy as well.
So yeah,
I think
when you look, just want to add one thing. If you're looking for a degree and you know you want to incorporate the language, there are essentially 3 different ways you can go about it. So one of them is where you have the language as part of your degree. For example, is at UCL, there's a course that's called Economic Statistics and the Language. So there it's obligatory that you have a language class in your course. Then alternatively, as Caroline and Sasha already mentioned, you can have it during your degree as an elective. And thirdly, you can also, some universities offer free language classes outside of your degree. So you don't get any credits actually for it, but you can still do it alongside your degree. Usually it's in the evening then.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that about optional modules particularly, you are, at least in Warwick, you are given the freedom of having external optional modules. So you'll have a home department. For me, that's philosophy, politics, and economics, which is unusual. Usually you'd have one home department, but then you are free to just go on to just different, so for example, I have a friend whose home department is math and who's studying math, but he has taken a ton of optional philosophy modules as external modules, which is quite interesting. And obviously that just adds to your credits at the end as well. So it's not like all that work goes to waste. So yeah, I think it can be extremely beneficial to take a language, especially if you plan to, say, work in Europe in the future. So knowing that language and being able to demonstrate to employers that, oh, I can speak French and I can perhaps live in France in the future. I think that could be really, really good.
Yeah, but I think it's a very interesting discussion because, for example, I'm actually not going to take French next year by choice. So I had it as part of my degree. However, I decided that I would prefer to use my optional modules to study something else in economics. And I'm just planning on learning French alongside because I'm already at the level where I can just, learn it by, reading books and things like that. So I think that it is not a very black and white, choice. It's not like, oh, if I want to learn a language, I have to take it as part of my degree. Sometimes independent study can also be a better option. So I think that it's really down to personal preferences and also to the degree to which you know the language already.
And just to add on to what Arjen said, like, you don't have to want to just work in the EU to learn another language. For the future, and especially for business, conducting business in Asia, in Japan, in China, they will want to speak to you in Mandarin or in Chinese. So if you're not going to learn it yourself, you better have a translator there because they're not going to do it in English, or at least very, very few of them are. In some sort of ways, that's still a little bit old-fashioned. That can definitely change by the time you guys get to the working market. Otherwise, other emerging markets around the world, Africa, South Africa, and learning your bit of Swahili is going to earn you major points if you're ever going to be doing business there. So in that way, also goes together with especially what business and management students need to know. You guys need to be good at people and reading people, communicating with them effectively, which is something that you will learn. Also learn in like work experience and stuff like this. But you're going to need that when you are working with people, not just in teams, but with people of different cultures. And knowing their language is always a really, really good point.
Yep. So the next question we have, which is again an interesting one, is which of these degrees is the most competitive?
All of them.
Let's have one word.
Oh, I mean, this could be a very big discussion. I think, well, you can look at the statistics for individual courses. From my experience, if you do a pure course, it's usually that there's a higher demand for those, because if you have a course which combines different degrees, you will obviously have, because you're going more into specifics, you will have different people with different interests matching to this specific degree. So I mean, please, Caroline or Sophia, Sasha, if you say, if you disagree with me, go ahead. But I think if you go into like a broad range course with different subjects in it, there's usually less people applying for it.
And no, if we're looking at like the competitiveness of courses and how many people are going to apply for it, as you just mentioned, Christian, the business courses at KCL are really, really competitive. I think they had around 6,000 applicants for business management. They accepted 150. So it is competitive. But again, if you just get a mentee or get a mentor from Project Access, and you're going to write a much better application and probably get in, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's not only about the course, it's also about the university, which is something to like that people should definitely keep in mind. So basically, yeah, I think that many courses are competitive at top universities. Also, like what Caroline emphasized, like when we are saying that these things are competitive, we are not saying, oh, you don't stand a chance. We think that you definitely stand a chance, which is why we are doing this webinar in the first place, because we definitely think that people can get into these courses, and that's definitely something that's, you know, perfectly feasible with the right approach, like with the right strategy, and for example, by getting help, for example, from Project Access, but also from other sources. So regarding the question whether joint honors is less competitive, I would say that it's a tricky thing to answer. I think it depends on how mainstream the joint degree is, and also how many places it offers. So you have to remember that, for example, for economics, it is a very popular course, but then it also means that many universities simply have more places and have a higher capacity for intake, right? Which which means that even if more people apply, the ratio of, you know, offered places to applicants may still be the same as if you have fewer places offered and fewer people applying. So I think that yeah, I would not make I would not conclude that, you know, they're less competitive, even if less people apply. But I would think about other factors as well. But as I said, I don't think it's a factor that you should consider in the first place when you're applying to university. I think that you should consider, you know, what you're interested in, which like basically consider your dream university. You have in the UK, you can apply to 5 universities, so apply to your top choices as well. Have a backup maybe as well, but I think that you should, like, even if it's competitive, just go for what you like best.
And I will say, if you get into one of these universities, you'll figure out that everything is competitive to a certain degree. Even getting into university, finding a place to live over the other tenants and getting that apartment first, or applying for spring week internships. I think one of the admissions officers at King's told me that when she explains to new students what a business study at King's and in London in general is, it's 60% what you study and the effort you put in at university. The other 40% is going out and getting involved in societies, in non-profits, in charities, joining clubs, going to Infinite events for companies, having internships and going to spring weeks, networking. All of that together is what makes up almost half of your course and what a future employer will see. if you spend 3 years only studying, even though you get a first in your degree and you get like a really, really good degree and good results, someone who maybe gets a 2-1 and has done all of these other things outside of uni will probably be chosen for that road over you, because they show so many other things and show that they've been able to do so many other things. And when it comes to doing all this stuff, joining a charity, joining a society, also very competitive. So it simply is. But I don't think you should be scared of it being competitive, not at all. If it's something you enjoy, you will also show true passion, and that will shine through in your personal statement. So I don't think you should be worried.
Competition is something that definitely everyone has to get used to. And I think that, so for me personally, when I got my offer from Warwick, I thought, okay, job done. I've studied hard over the last, few like years at school. I thought, okay, like I achieved everything there is to achieve, and now I can just, study my course. But I was really wrong to think so, because in truth, when you actually go to this university, there is a lot of competing ahead of you. But like that's, kind of healthy competition. Like this competition will ensure that you do more amazing things. Like you will inspire each other, and you'll really be able to use your time in the best way possible. So competition is something that you can use to thrive and to access other opportunities, and it's something that you should be excited about. Of course, it's not easy, but it's also just a very essential part of life, it turned out.
Yeah. I mean, for me specifically, like the entire situation around COVID meant that term 3 for me was completely at home. And since I'm a first year, my exams got cancelled, which meant term 3 was basically nothing. And if I did have project access, I would probably be just spending time watching Netflix all day. So in that sense, working for these societies can be extremely rewarding, and you wouldn't even know when that 60 to 40 ratio just turns the other way around, and the majority of the time you spend at university is actually for all the additional projects you can take upon. The next question we have is actually really interesting, and I had to stand up and grab a book, which I did buy.
I have that book as well. A very good book.
I think this is a university.
I have another
book.
one as well from this author. Yeah, just.
So the question is, what are some books to read if you're not sure about economics, and which would give you an insight into practical aspects of it? Definitely The Undercover Economist. It's a universally recommended book. It's really interesting as well. And I would start with this. I would also recommend just I would say reading the news. Like that definitely helps a lot. Reading something like The Economist, which surprisingly is not simply about economics, but it's about politics. But even looking, I think as Christian mentioned, economics is not just the study of numbers, but economics is also the study of just a methodological way of looking at life. And I think that kind of thing can be developed if you're reading trustable and like just news sources. So I would start with The Undercover Economist, and I believe Tim Harford has actually written a sequel as well, which you can read, which is quite interesting for me. And then just read news and just keep on looking for such resources. So
yeah. On that, okay. Or Christian, do you want to go first?
No, you go first. I'll go after. It's fine.
Okay, so I just wanted to, I also have The Undercover Economist with me, but and I also have like another book by the same author, 50 Things That Made the Modern Economy. But overall, but I would say that my message when it comes to reading books to prepare for your course, or like to see if you're interested in this, first of all, don't feel pressured to do all the reading. Don't feel pressured to basically learn economics before starting the course. For example, I wanted to read this book before before starting university, and I actually haven't. I was doing other things over the summer. So don't think that like everyone who's doing these courses is actually reading like tons of books and already knows econ before they start their degree. But it is a good idea to read some books to see if you're interested. So for example, my personal favorite that I read before choosing my course, and that really actually persuaded me to study economics, is quite unusual, is by Paul Collier, who is an economist at Oxford, and it's called The Bottom Billion. So it is about the poorest countries and how they can develop. But one thing that really stood out to me while reading this book is how research and how data can help economists draw conclusions about the world and help policy making. So here the author really talks about the research that he did also, to draw conclusions, and how he basically created these models. And that showed me how important these skills can be. And it really made me excited about, learning that approach. There are other books like Nudge, for example, which is a classic. And then there are books which are, very specialized. For example, The Globalization of Inequality, that talks more about, addressing inequality from the perspective of an economist. So I would say that all of these books, like, don't think of them as, oh, like, I have to, learn the course, or like have to learn the subject. What's written there actually doesn't matter. What matters more is like the approach that these people took, and basically their thinking, so like how they think. And that's something that I think will show you whether you want to study such courses or not, if you get an insight into the brain of an economist, essentially, and the work that they did.
Exactly, I couldn't agree more. And I think also it's important that you choose something that you're genuinely interested in, and not something you've seen on a list somewhere that apparently an economics student or a management student should read. I mean, some of these books are really good, and that's why they are on those lists. But if you want to write your personal statement from like the bottom of your heart, kind of, it's supposed to be really about you and not about what you've read on a list somewhere. So this is most easily done if you write about something that you actually enjoy. For instance, I actually also read The Undercover Economist and Freakonomics, which is another book. I think it's kind of like the second most popular for applications. But then also Thinking Fast and Slow from Daniel Kahneman. Unfortunately,
I have that as well. So
right now. But it's a really,
I really like it as well.
Yeah, it's really
I've never read it, guys. Like, I'm going to read it after this webinar.
You should. It really is. It's quite psychological at the same time. But it's written by Daniel Kahneman. So I mean, not doing any adverts here, but choose something that you genuinely are interested in, so you can write an amazing personal statement, and in some cases also an interview about it. Like, don't do something that you've just seen on a list.
Yes, for sure. And like, if you see that there's a topic that you're interested in, then just feel free to dive into it more. So for example, for me, after I read this book, At the Bottom Billion, I saw that, I'm really interested in the author and like in the subject as well. So I actually found an online course on edX. It's a platform for online courses. I think it's like also a good way to explore, different degrees. So I found a course on edX that was taught by this guy, and that was like a 30-hour online course, and I completed the course. Like, I passed the test, and I really enjoyed learning more about it. So that was basically like online lectures, and that's something that I also wrote for my personal statement. So I said, like, I've never done economics before, but I read this book, I've done this course, this online course in economics, and I really enjoy learning about it. I really enjoy studying it. So that's how I was able to basically show to the person reading my personal statement that I'm serious about studying these things and that I enjoy learning about it.
Just one final thing, I think you should really make your personal statement a narrative. So, and things need to fit together. So it makes no sense if you have if you're all kind of all over the place in the personal statement. Try to read something that's kind of interconnected, or maybe contrasting two ideas, so it reads like fluently.
Yeah. So the last question we have, because we don't have a lot of time left, and I think that is something I have faced as well, which I have questioned myself, which I actually don't have a definite answer to, is what are the problems that international students face in getting internships or placements in fields such as banking? And answer as well, and it also depends where you're coming from.
Disadvantage, to be honest. In banking, in this match, you have like just as good of a chance, especially for business management at King's. I have met a handful of people in the UK. The rest are international. That means like majority of people are not from the UK. which also shows how competitive it is, that the UK students might actually not get in. Very, very few of them get in, which means that especially for London big banks, investment banks and consultancies, they will hire just as many internationals, if not more, and on for internships and also for graduate programs afterwards. I will actually be definite and say you have no disadvantage going in here, because you might actually even be able to supply them with additional knowledge that they would not have from just having UK or national employees.
Yeah, and these companies for sure care about diversity as well. So they definitely want to have a diverse workplace. And also remember that they just want the best people. So basically, if you show them that you might be the best applicant, then they will go through whatever it takes to recruit you. So for example, I know that some people had fears regarding if the company would sponsor a visa maybe later, or things like that, and whether that would affect the decision. However, remember that these companies have a lot of money essentially, and they want their best money investment is to get a good employee. So if you can show them that you are interested in this internship and that you have potentially these skills, then I don't think that there is discrimination here. I think it's very much merit-based.
Yes, I mean, I'd say it's the only reason I'd say it's slightly more nuanced is if you have a non-EU passport, in which since you don't really have the right to remain, and then it gets slightly more confusing. I know they're constantly changing laws here, and I know especially post-Brexit they want more migrants to come in. So I know for India, because I'm from India and I hold an Indian passport, they changed the law from, so essentially once your university ends, earlier you were supposed to leave the country within 6 months, unless unless an employee was willing to sponsor you. They have changed that to 2 years now, which is extremely nice and extremely welcoming. But is this something, if you're coming from a specific country, maybe look into all of those laws as well, what that says. And I think being slightly more realistic here, because I especially coming from India, I have heard stories of people just having to go back even when they didn't really want to, because spaces at the top companies would indeed be limited, and not all companies will be willing to sponsor a visa after knowing you for a short period of time. So I think that's just something to keep in mind. But most of all, if you're willing to put in the time, and if you're willing to show that you do have those skills, they are more than willing. As Zosia said, they have a lot of money and they want the best people. So if merit-based, you are better than, say, a British person, you would not be discriminated whatsoever. And we actually have one last question, which we do not have the time to answer, but I think that actually leads us to the last slide, which is that you should sign up as a mentee with Project Access. So very excitingly, we have our program starting very soon. Our program on Monday, indeed. So essentially, you guys have about 4 days to sign up. I would definitely recommend signing up as a mentee with Project Access, because you get free access to students such as ourselves. I know some of us are already registered as mentors, and say you have a target university, you have a target course, and you are from a country which you are, you will be assigned a mentor who is studying at that target university, who is studying that course, and who is from your country. So they will have extremely specific feedback for you, and they will be able to help you all throughout the way. I hope this webinar essentially would have helped you answer some of the questions regarding what kind of degrees you should be thinking of. We are hosting even more webinars in the future. So our next webinar is going to be on UK universities in depth. So we will explore some ways in which how you go about choosing a university within the United Kingdom. After that, we have one on STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Maybe you're interested in mathematics, or maybe you know someone who's interested. And we have a ton of webinars planned, even US in depth, in fact, in the future. So I definitely think you guys should first sign up for more webinars. And second, you should, so first sign up for more webinars. And second, sign up as a mentee with Project Access, because it can be extremely rewarding and it's a free resource completely. I think we have two questions. So one question is, please give us some tip on how to prepare for the UCAS essay. So we did talk a little bit about how it has to be personal, as Christian mentioned, and how you can essentially, in a way, use books, but use topics that you're really passionate about and write about those. We will be covering more of this within the program specifically. So again, another reason for you to sign up as a mentee. And what about scholarships? That is a tricky one. I would say, so we did talk a little bit about scholarships in UK/US universities in depth, a webinar which has happened in the past. So have a look at our YouTube page. So maybe you can learn a little bit more there. We are planning a webinar specifically on scholarships and on financial aid. So keep a lookout for that again on our social media channels. And then, do any of you guys have anything to add on scholarships?
No, I have. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to quickly touch upon the UCAS statement you have to write. Get yourself a mentor, have your mentor guide you. It can really differ from course to course, university to university, what they're asking for, what you're supposed to write. They will not tell you. You have to get yourself a mentor who's gone through that same process before, and we can give you that in Project Access. So please go and sign up, because it is so individual. There is no one way of saying how you should write your personal statement. For example, I did no prior reading. I only talked about what I had of experience, what I've done, and related all of that to business management. So there is really no set way of doing it. Again, get yourself a mentor and they will help you.
And one final thing, for many countries, Project Access has a countries team. So also have a look on social media for the country teams, because they also do individual workshops. If you really want tailored feedback on your personal statement and advice, you should join the mentorship program. But also, for example, Team Germany is going to have a workshop in 2 weeks about personal statements. So just stay tuned on the Project Access website or on Facebook or Instagram, for instance, where we actually do have workshops happening right now as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and remember that mentors are sometimes people like us. So, for example, I am registered as the mentor. So, if you sign up to our program, you could get a personal feedback from literally from one of us, and we will ensure that we are there to support you along the way.
I think that brings us really well to the final conclusion. I'm sure you guys will have more questions. So we have our contact details here. You can feel free to email us. Marlin, who's not here with us right now, heads Access Academy. She's the one who's been emailing you constantly about the webinars. So feel free to reach out to her if you have any specific feedback regarding how we're going about Access Academy. If you have any ideas for webinars in the future, please give that to us as well. We will try to implement that within Access Academy. Again, I'm Aryan. I'm helping with Access Academy as well. And finally, I would like to thank our panelists for joining us, because you're the one who make the webinars possible, and all our attendees as well. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
That's it.
Good luck to everyone.
Good luck to everyone indeed. Yeah. Bye.